The Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with the familiar mixture of excitement and condescension that always accompanied discussions about newly discovered species. Today's topic was Earth, a small blue planet on the outer rim of the galaxy, and its dominant species called humans. Ambassador of the Empire adjusted his crystalline breathing apparatus and leaned back in his hover seat, his 6 eyes glinting with amusement. The holographic display showed various Earth creatures in their natural habitats, and the assembled delegates couldn't contain their laughter. "Look at this pathetic creature," announced, pointing a clawed appendage at the image of a house cat. "The humans worship these tiny furballs. They call them apex predators of their households." His voice carried the metallic tinge common to his species, making his mockery sound even more grating. The delegate, a towering with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. "Their largest land predator weighs barely 800 pounds, he chittered. "On Prime, our younglings hunt creatures twice that size for sport." Council leader, whose species had conquered 17 star systems, gestured for silence with his massive tentacles. "We must be fair to the humans," he said, though his tone suggested anything but fairness. "They have shown remarkable ingenuity despite their physical limitations. Their technology is adequate for a species that evolved on such a gentle world." The display shifted to show Earth's various predators: lions, tigers, bears, sharks, and wolves. Each image drew fresh waves of amusement from the assembled aliens. Their own had produced creatures that would make Earth's fiercest animals look like toys. "The irony," continued, "is that these humans consider themselves survivors. They speak of their killer instinct and their predatory nature, yet they've never faced true danger. Their planet is a paradise garden compared to real worlds where evolution forges actual predators." Doctor sat in the human observation booth, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. As Earth's and the only human present at this closed session, she was forced to endure their casual dismissal of her species and her world. The translation device in her ear ensured she understood every mocking word, every dismissive gesture. "Perhaps," suggested the delegate from Thresh, a world where sentient plants had evolved into apex predators, "we should assign them to agricultural worlds. They seem well suited for peaceful endeavors, given their lack of natural defensive capabilities." The suggestion drew approving murmurs from around the chamber. Hands gripped the armrests of her chair so hard her knuckles went white. These aliens saw humans as farmers, as a gentle species suitable only for tending crops on border worlds far from any real action or responsibility. Council leader's voice boomed across the hall. "The question before us is simple. What role shall humanity play in our galactic community? Their technological advancement suggests intelligence, but their biological heritage suggests limitations." "I propose we examine their military capabilities," announced General of the Hegemony's War Council. His species resembled armored behemoths, each individual standing 12 feet tall with natural weapons that could slice through steel. "Any species seeking membership must prove their worth in combat. It's the universal constant." Watched as the display changed again, this time showing human military footage. Soldiers in combat gear, tanks rolling across battlefields, fighter jets screaming through the sky. But even these images seemed to amuse the aliens rather than impress them. "Primitive kinetic weapons," observed. "Chemical propellants launching metal projectiles. How quaint. Their most advanced weapons would be toys to our youngest warriors." The delegates' compound eyes glittered with something like pity. "They fight each other over resources that are abundant on most civilized worlds. Water, food, territory. Such concerns are beneath evolved species." "Nevertheless," General rumbled, his voice like grinding stone, "we should test them. If they wish to join the galactic community, they must prove they can contribute to our collective defense. The Void Runners have been increasingly active on the Rim worlds." His breath caught. The Void Runners were the galaxy's most feared raiders, creatures from dark space that consumed entire civilizations. No newly inducted species was ever sent against them. It would be suicide. "An excellent suggestion," Council leader agreed. "We'll assign a human military unit to assist in defending the mining colony on 7. The Void Runners have been probing that system for weeks. If the humans can prove their worth there, perhaps we've underestimated them." The trap was set and could see it clearly. They were sending humans into a situation designed to fail, probably hoping to demonstrate humanity's inadequacy once and for all. The mining colony was isolated, with minimal backup available. Whatever human unit they sent would be walking into a nightmare. As the session continued, made mental notes of everything she observed. The casual cruelty of these supposedly advanced beings, their assumption that physical size and natural weapons determined a species' worth, their complete misunderstanding of what made humans dangerous. They looked at Earth's predators and saw only size and claw length. They completely missed the intelligence, the adaptability, the relentless persistence that had allowed a relatively small primate to dominate an entire planet. They saw humanity's lack of natural weapons and assumed weakness, not understanding that humans had become weapons themselves. The debate continued for hours, with various delegates suggesting different roles for humanity in their galactic hierarchy. Agricultural specialists, customer service representatives, entertainers for more serious species. Each suggestion was more insulting than the last, treating humans like amusing pets rather than equals. "I believe we've reached a consensus," Council leader finally announced. "Humanity will be granted provisional membership, pending their performance in defending 7. General, you'll coordinate with their military leadership to select an appropriate unit." "It will be done," the general replied. "Though I suggest we keep expectations realistic. Their largest soldiers are smaller than our adolescents." Stood and activated her communication device, sending an encrypted message to Earth Command. They needed to choose their representative unit carefully. Not the biggest, not the most technologically advanced, but the most adaptable, the most stubborn, the most human. As she left the assembly hall, couldn't shake the feeling that these aliens were about to learn something important about Earth's evolution. They kept focusing on the size of humanity's predators, completely missing the point. Earth's most dangerous predator wasn't a lion or a bear. It was something much smaller, much more persistent, and infinitely more cunning than anything these aliens had ever encountered. Something that could survive in conditions that would kill most other creatures, fight with a ferocity that its size, and never, ever give up once it had locked onto its target. The aliens wanted to test humanity's military might, almost smiled as she walked toward her shuttle. They were about to meet a Wolverine, and they had no idea what was coming. Back on Earth, the message arrived at the Pentagon within hours. Military planners gathered in secure briefings rooms, analyzing the situation. They understood the trap, saw the setup for what it was. The aliens expected humans to fail, to prove their unworthiness for galactic society. Colonel James Mitchell, a grizzled veteran with 30 years of experience in the world's most hostile environments, read the brief twice before setting it down. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes held the same cold calculation that had kept him alive through a dozen impossible missions. "Sir," his aide asked quietly, "what kind of unit should we recommend?" Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, thinking about wolverines in the Canadian wilderness. Small creatures, barely 40 pounds, that could drive away bears 10 times their size. Creatures that ate what they could catch and fought what they couldn't avoid, never backing down from anything. "Get me the 15th Special Operations Regiment," he said finally, "and tell them to pack for a long deployment." The aide looked confused. The 15th was one of their smallest units, specialists in survival and unconventional warfare rather than heavy combat. "Sir, shouldn't we send a larger force? Maybe armor support." Mitchell shook his head. "These aliens think they know what human predators look like. They're about to find out they've been looking at the wrong species entirely." 3 days later, a small transport ship left Earth's orbit carrying 47 members of the 15th Special Operations Regiment. They traveled light, carrying equipment designed for adaptation rather than overwhelming firepower. Their mission parameters were simple: defend the mining colony, protect the civilians, and show the galaxy what humans were really made of. None of them knew they were about to change the course of galactic history. None of them realized that their actions would force an entire civilization to reconsider everything they thought they knew about predators, survival, and the true meaning of dangerous. They were just soldiers doing their job, heading toward a distant world where something ancient and hungry was stirring in the darkness between stars. Something that had devoured civilizations far more advanced than humanity. Something that considered the galaxy's greatest warriors to be nothing more than food. The Void Runners were coming to 7. and 47 humans were all that stood between them and another dead world. The aliens thought they were watching humanity fail. Instead, they were about to witness the birth of a legend. 7 looked like hell had frozen over and then been strip-mined by creatures with no sense of beauty. The planet's surface was a maze of industrial equipment, massive excavators, and processing facilities that stretched across barren landscapes under a perpetually gray sky. 3 moons hung in the alien sky like dead eyes, casting eerie shadows across the mining operation that had been humanity's first glimpse into galactic commerce. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos stepped off the transport ramp and immediately felt the planet's gravity try to crush her into the ground. At 1.4 Earth standard, every step required extra effort, every piece of equipment felt heavier, and every breath came a little harder. Around her, 46 other members of the 15th Special Operations Regiment adjusted their gear and began their assessment of what would either be their new home or their tomb. "Welcome to paradise," muttered Corporal Jackson, his voice crackling through the comm system built into their helmets. The young soldier from Detroit had seen urban warfare at its ugliest, but this alien landscape was something else entirely. The mining colony's administrator, a nervous named, approached with what passed for urgency among his crystalline species. His 6 eyes darted constantly between the humans and the horizon, as if expecting death to come marching over the nearest ridge at any moment. "You are the human military specialists?" His voice came through their universal translators with a tinny, artificial quality. "I was told to expect more, many more." Captain Lisa, commanding officer of the human unit, kept her expression neutral. At 5'4" and 130 pounds, she looked like a child next to the 8-foot-tall alien administrator. Her team had trained for this exact scenario, dealing with species that judged capability by size alone. "We're what Earth Command determined was appropriate for the mission," replied calmly. "We'll need a complete briefing on your defensive capabilities, personnel locations, and any intelligence you have on the Void Runner activity in this system." His breathing apparatus wheezed something that might have been laughter. "Defensive capabilities? This is a mining operation, not a fortress. We have emergency bunkers and some basic security systems, but nothing designed to stop the Void Runners. That's why the Council sent you." The alien's casual dismissal of their chances was obvious. He spoke to them like someone explaining a terminal diagnosis, polite but resigned. Could see it in his body language, in the way he avoided direct eye contact with his primary visual organs. Expected the humans to die here, and he was already mentally writing their obituaries. "Show us the facility layout," ordered. "We need to understand the terrain, identify choke points, and establish overlapping fields of fire." As they walked through the mining complex, his team spread out in a careful formation that looked casual but gave them complete situational awareness. Each soldier carried equipment that seemed almost primitive compared to the alien technology around them: projectile weapons, explosive devices, communication gear that relied on radio frequencies rather than quantum entanglement. The mining facility was massive, covering nearly 50 square kilometers of the planet's surface. Massive extractors pulled rare minerals from deep underground, processing them through automated systems that required minimal supervision. The entire operation was run by a skeleton crew of various alien species, maybe 300 individuals total. "The Void Runners typically attack in waves," explained as they walked past a massive ore processor. "First come their scouts, creatures that phase in and out of normal space to test defenses. Then the assault troops, things that exist partially in dark matter. Finally, if they encounter significant resistance, they bring in their heavy units." Sergeant First Class David, the team's demolitions expert, studied the industrial equipment with professional interest. "What kind of detection systems do you have for phase-shifted entities?" "Standard gravimetric sensors," replied. "But the Void Runners have learned to mask their signatures. By the time our sensors detect them, they're usually already inside the perimeter." Nodded, filing away the information. The aliens had built their defenses around technology, assuming that better sensors and more sophisticated weapons would solve their problems. It was the same mistake that advanced civilizations had been making for believing that complexity was the same as effectiveness. "What about their behavior patterns?" asked Tech Sergeant Williams, their communications specialist. "Do they have specific objectives, or do they just destroy everything?" "They harvest," said, and for the first time his artificial voice carried real fear. They consume living beings, converting organic matter into energy for their ships. The mining equipment they ignore, but every living creature. He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. The human team absorbed this information without visible reaction, but could see the subtle changes in their posture, the way their hands moved closer to their weapons. These were soldiers who had faced human monsters in urban warfare, jungle combat, and desert campaigns. They understood predators, understood the mindset of something that viewed other living beings as food. Over the next 6 hours, his team conducted a thorough reconnaissance of the entire facility. They identified 17 potential defensive positions, mapped the underground tunnel systems that connected the major processing centers, and established primary and secondary communication networks that didn't rely on the facility's main computer systems. "The bunkers are built into the bedrock," reported Staff Sergeant after examining the emergency shelters. "Good protection against energy weapons, but they're all connected by maintenance tunnels. If the Void Runners get into the tunnel system, they could access every bunker simultaneously." Studied the facility schematics on her tactical display, her mind already working through dozens of possible scenarios. The aliens had built their defenses like engineers instead of soldiers, focusing on protecting equipment rather than people, creating elaborate systems that looked impressive but had fundamental flaws. "We'll need to modify their approach," she decided. "I want explosive charges rigged in the primary tunnels, deadman switches so we can collapse them if necessary. Identify which pieces of equipment can be weaponized or used as obstacles. Williams, start working on a backup communication system that uses their industrial network as a relay." The team dispersed to their assigned tasks, moving with the easy efficiency that came from years of working together. They'd been deployed to hellholes across 3 continents, places where conventional military thinking fell apart and survival depended on adaptation, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to quit. As evening fell on 7, stood on an elevated platform overlooking the mining complex and tried to see it through the eyes of an approaching predator. The aliens had built a buffet, she realized. Wide open spaces with no natural cover, clear approaches from multiple directions, and a population concentrated in predictable locations. "Captain," Williams' voice crackled through her earpiece. "I'm picking up some unusual quantum fluctuations on the edge of the system. Could be background radiation, but the pattern seems too regular." Felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always preceded combat. "How long until they arrive?" "Best guess, 6 to 8 hours, maybe less if they're not bothering with stealth." 6 hours to turn a mining facility into a fortress. 6 hours to prepare 47 humans to fight creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. 6 hours to prove that Earth's predators were more dangerous than anything the galactic community had imagined. "All teams, this is," she broadcast on their tactical frequency. "We're going active. Assume hostile contact within 8 hours. Begin Phase 2 preparations immediately." Across the mining complex, the human soldiers shifted into their final preparations. They moved through the facility like ghosts, appearing wherever work needed to be done, disappearing before the alien workers could properly register their presence. Explosive charges appeared in strategic locations. Weapons caches were established in predetermined fallback positions. Improvised obstacles began appearing in key corridors. Found 3 hours before dawn, his crystalline features reflecting the artificial lights of the mining facility. "The other council representatives are monitoring this engagement," he informed her. "If your species fails here, they'll be assigned to agricultural worlds in the Outer Rim. If you succeed—" He paused, as if the possibility hadn't really occurred to him. "What happens if we succeed?" asked. "That depends on how you define success," replied. "Survival would be unexpected. Actually defeating a Void Runner assault force would be unprecedented for a newly contacted species. It might change how the Council views your people." Nodded, understanding the subtext. This wasn't just a test of humanity's military capabilities. It was a demonstration, a chance to show the galaxy that humans deserved respect rather than condescension. The aliens expected them to fail bravely, to die with honor while demonstrating their inadequacy. They had no idea what they were actually about to witness. "Contact," Williams announced over the comm system. Multiple phase signatures appearing throughout the complex. They're not bothering with reconnaissance this time. Smiled grimly and activated her weapon systems. The aliens wanted to see what Earth's predators could do. They were about to discover that the most dangerous predator wasn't the largest, the strongest, or the one with the biggest claws. It was the one that refused to stay down, no matter how many times you thought you'd killed it. All teams, weapons free, ordered. Let's show these things what humans do to creatures that hunt our people. The first Void Runner materialized in the central processing facility, a nightmare of shadow and hunger that existed only partially in normal space. It was roughly humanoid but wrong in ways that hurt to look at directly, with appendages that seemed to bend through dimensions that didn't exist. It lasted exactly 4 seconds before Corporal Jackson's rifle fire tore through its semi-corporeal form, the specially modified ammunition designed to interact with phase-shifted matter. The creature's death scream echoed through dimensions human ears couldn't process, but its collapse into normal matter was satisfyingly final. "First blood to Jackson," announced calmly. "Let's keep this up." Around the mining complex, more Void Runners began materializing, expecting to find frightened prey clustered in defensive positions. Instead, they found humans who had spent the last 8 hours turning a peaceful mining facility into the galaxy's most unwelcoming neighborhood. The real battle was just beginning, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, ancient predators were about to learn what it meant to hunt something that bit back. The Void Runners came like nightmares made manifest, pouring through dimensional tears that opened across the mining facility like infected wounds in reality itself. Captain watched from her command position as creatures that physics materialized throughout the complex, their forms shifting between solid matter and something that existed in the spaces between atoms. "Perimeter teams report," she ordered into her comm, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "Alpha team engaged northeast sector," Kame's voice, punctuated by the sharp crack of rifle fire. "These things don't like our modified ammunition. Whatever Williams did to those bullets, it's working." Smiled grimly. Williams had spent the preparation time analyzing Void Runner physiology from the facility's database, then modifying their ammunition with trace elements that interfered with phase-shifting abilities. It was exactly the kind of adaptation that made human soldiers dangerous. They took whatever they had and made it better. "Bravo team has contact, central processing," reported over the sound of explosions. "I'm using the ore crushers as improvised weapons. These things definitely don't expect industrial equipment to start shooting at them." The central monitoring station in the facility's administrative center had become humanity's war room, its displays showing feed from dozens of security cameras throughout the complex. Stood beside, his 6 eyes wide with something approaching shock as he watched the human soldiers turn his peaceful mining operation into a battlefield. "Impossible," he whispered, his breathing apparatus cycling rapidly. "The Void Runners phase through conventional defenses. How are your weapons affecting them?" "Because we don't believe in impossible," replied, watching as Staff Sergeant Santos led her team through a perfectly executed ambush in the eastern refinement sector. "We adapt." On the screen, Santos and her 3 soldiers had turned a maintenance corridor into a kill zone using nothing but mining equipment and creative thinking. Void Runners materialized in what they thought was an empty hallway, only to find themselves caught between 2 massive ore conveyors that had been weaponized with explosive charges and mobility denial systems. "Charlie team has them channeled," Santos reported. "They keep trying to phase through the conveyors, but Williams' modifications are disrupting their dimensional stability. It's like watching ghosts get clotheslined." The humor in her voice was pure human soldier gallows humor in the face of creatures that had terrorized the galaxy could cease confusion at the casualness with which her people approached combat against supposedly invincible enemies. "Delta team status." "We're mobile in the underground tunnel system," came Jackson's voice. "These things are trying to use the maintenance tunnels to access the bunkers. We're playing hide and seek with monsters, and somehow we're winning." The tactical display showed movement throughout the complex, but not the chaotic route the aliens had expected. Instead, the human soldiers were controlling the flow of battle, using the facility's layout to their advantage while denying the Void Runners their usual tactical benefits. "Captain," Williams' voice cut through the chatter, "I'm reading massive phase signatures incoming. Whatever we just killed, it was the advance scouts. The real assault force is about to arrive. Studied the display, watching as dimensional tiers began opening throughout the complex on a scale 10 times larger than anything they'd seen before. The Void Runners weren't just probing anymore, they were committing to a full assault. All teams phase 2 defensive positions, she ordered. They're bringing friends. What emerged from the larger dimensional rifts made the scout forms look like house pets. These Void Runners stood 12 feet tall when they bothered to maintain coherent form, their bodies shifting between matter states like living liquid metal. They moved with predatory intelligence, analyzing the battlefield before advancing. These ones are smarter, observed from his position near the primary ore processor. They're not just materializing randomly, they're coordinating. Could see it too. The larger Void Runners were studying the human defensive positions, learning from their scouts' failures. They approached more cautiously, testing each area before committing to an attack. It was exactly what she'd hoped for intelligent enemies that could be manipulated. Execute trap protocol, she ordered. Across the complex, human soldiers began what appeared to be a fighting withdrawal from their prepared positions. To observing aliens, it looked like the humans were finally being overwhelmed by superior force. The Void Runners, sensing weakness, pressed their advantage and moved into the facility's central areas. They walked directly into the most elaborate ambush in the history of warfare. Fire in the hole, his voice boomed over the comm system. The central processing facility erupted in a precisely choreographed sequence of explosions. Not random destruction, but a carefully planned demolition that turned the mining equipment into the galaxy's largest improvised weapon. Ore conveyors became kinetic projectiles. Processing vats became chemical dispersal systems. The facility's own power grid became a massive electric trap. But the real genius was in how the humans had modified everything. Williams had laced the explosives with the same phase disruption elements they'd used in their ammunition. The Void Runners couldn't escape by shifting dimensions because the very air around them had been weaponized. Direct hits on 17 targets, Santos reported with satisfaction. These things are definitely mortal when you remove their dimensional escape routes. The surviving Void Runners regrouped quickly, but their coordination was broken. The humans had turned their greatest advantage, their ability to phase between dimensions, into a liability. Every time a Void Runner tried to use their natural abilities, they ran into weapons and traps designed specifically to counter those abilities. Second wave incoming, Williams announced. But they're coming in careful. They've learned we're not the easy targets they expected. Watch the tactical display as new Void Runners entered the battle space, but these moved differently. They maintained solid form, advanced with covering formations, and avoided the areas where their predecessors had been destroyed. They were treating the humans like a legitimate threat. Charlie and Delta teams begin harassment protocol, ordered. Let's show them what guerrilla warfare looks like when your enemy can walk through walls. What followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic military history. Human soldiers who had learned urban combat in Earth's most dangerous cities applied those lessons to fighting predators. They used hit-and-run tactics, improvised explosives, and psychological warfare against creatures that had never encountered enemies who refused to fight by conventional rules. Sergeant Jackson turned the underground tunnel system into a nightmare maze where Void Runners found themselves lost, separated from their units, and facing human soldiers who knew every inch of terrain they'd mapped and modified. The aliens had built straight, logical tunnels. The humans had turned them into a three-dimensional puzzle where wrong turns led to dead ends filled with explosives. Staff Sergeant used the facility's crane systems to create mobile weapons platforms, turning mining equipment into impromptu armor and weapons systems that could engage Void Runners at range, while providing cover for his team's movements. Tech Sergeant Williams had done something unprecedented. He'd hacked the facility's computer systems to turn every electronic device into a sensor network. The Void Runners couldn't move anywhere without triggering alarms, motion detectors, and automated responses from systems they didn't even know existed. Captain said quietly, his voice filled with something had never heard from an alien before: respect. What we're witnessing, this is not how wars are fought in galactic civilization. No, agreed, watching her soldiers systematically dismantle a Void Runner assault force using nothing but human ingenuity and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. This is how wars are won. The battle raged for 6 hours, but it wasn't really a battle anymore. It was a demonstration. The Void Runners, creatures that had terrorized advanced civilizations across the galaxy, found themselves systematically outfought by a species they'd never heard of using weapons and tactics that shouldn't have worked. When the last Void Runner fell to Corporal Jackson's rifle fire in the facility's eastern sector, and strange silence settled over the mining complex. The humans had done more than survive, they'd achieved a complete victory against enemies that had never been completely defeated by anyone. All teams report casualties, ordered. Alpha Team, 3 minor injuries, no casualties. Bravo Team, all green. Charlie Team, 2 wounded, everyone operational. Delta Team, no casualties. We're still finding Void Runner bodies in the tunnels. Looked at, whose crystalline features reflected the emergency lighting that had replaced the facility's normal illumination. You'll need to report this to the Galactic Council. They won't believe it, said quietly. A newly contacted species completely defeating a full Void Runner assault with no fatalities. It's never happened before, ever. Then maybe, said, checking her weapon before beginning the cleanup phase, the Galactic Council needs to reconsider what they think they know about predators. Across the facility, human soldiers were already beginning salvage operations, studying Void Runner technology, analyzing their tactics, and discussing improvements for next time. Because that was what humans did. They learned, adapted, and prepared for the next challenge. In the Galactic Council's monitoring stations, alien observers watched in stunned silence as 47 humans began converting a mining facility into a fortress, using materials scavenged from creatures that had been the stuff of nightmares for thousands of years. The universe was about to discover that Earth's most dangerous predator wasn't big, wasn't fast, and didn't have impressive claws. It was small, stubborn, infinitely adaptable, and absolutely refused to accept that anything was impossible. The humans had introduced themselves to galactic civilization, and nothing would ever be the same again.